but we have wonderful guests here that we want to make sure we stick to the time as close as possible. Their time is very valuable to make sure this thing runs smoothly. For those of you who don't know, and didn't see my name on the signs coming up here, I'm Senator Caroline Menjivar. Welcome to the great Senate District of welcome to my alma mater. So before I go into some remarks, we're going to have the president of LA Valley College provide some welcoming remarks to his house, because we're in his house here. President Barry, come on up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. It's terrific to have you here at Valley College, especially on this topic. And I really appreciate, Senator, your leadership in pulling folks together and everyone coming around on this important topic. And I give you my perspective from higher education. Over the last 20 years, we've really seen a pretty big shift in many of our students. And we are seeing a lot of students with behavioral mental health background that we hadn't seen historically decades before, probably because treatments weren't at the place 30, 40 years ago where a lot of folks could participate in higher education. But that started to change. And you know, whether it's schizophrenia or other mental health disorders, we've seen a big change over the last few decades. And by and large, many folks just are able to flourish in higher education. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. Perhaps people stop treatment or other factors, and it becomes a challenge for us to think through. Layering on top of that, with college-age population, suicidal ideations have always been a problem. And with the pandemic, that has certainly only gotten worse. The vast majority of college students since the pandemic, have elevated anxiety, sometimes really high levels of anxiety. So behavioral health and mental health is foremost on our mind on a whole bunch of fronts. So I love you all coming together and talking about in this important context with the justice system and how best that we can help support people and get them engaged in leading positive, productive lives. That's the exact same goal for us, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of intersection points for colleges like Valley College and this world as well. So we're thrilled to do everything that we can to support these efforts. Hosting this meeting is just one small token, but really anything that we can do to contribute, help support, we're absolutely committed to doing. And again, I just love that you all are coming together. How many people are behavioral or mental health practitioners in the room? Just a few. I was going to start venting for some of my own challenges and anxieties over the past couple of years, but maybe it'll be another venue.
We can talk after.
But it is a challenge. We all have, the last few years have been rough on a lot of folks. So thank you for coming together and taking care of folks who need some support. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, President Rivers. Thank you so much. In fact, I keep coming back to my alma mater. We just partnered again. Well, we partnered last week.
Yeah.
So we did get out the vote here. We had a voting center. We gave out free tacos. There was some like a skating club here too with Power 106 and 93.9. Even though my generation didn't vote as well as we thought we were gonna, or I wanted us to vote, we're gonna keep pushing to get these young folks involved, right?
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so why are we here? We're here because two of my colleagues before my time passed a bill, Senator Eggman and Senator Umber, that created a statewide new program called CarePort. Now, about 3 months ago in December, LA County was designated to start this new program. And I think it's always beneficial to not wait so long to have an update on what things are looking like, even though we have to understand it's only been about 3 months. And this can potentially be where we're learning how to adapt and also taking great success stories for how well we're doing. And as your state representative, it's really important for us not to just pass legislation, but to also come back to our districts and let you know, especially when they're big packets like this, how it's gonna actually impact people's lives and and the implementation part of it. So I, as a social worker, as someone who is championing mental health reform and just uplifting behavioral health as a whole in Sacramento, I wanted to make sure that I led a town hall and brought the experts that you'll be hearing from to talk more about CareCorps in one of the largest county in the state of California and what we're doing to help address the needs that we're seeing in our youth and with our veterans, just across every single demographic, everyone across socioeconomic statuses. Mental health and behavioral need is just touching so many people in our lives now. So who are we hearing from today? We're hearing from three wonderful individuals, and they have, I think, decades and decades worth of a background on their resume. So I'm gonna try to trim that up in a couple of sentences because these people are just wonderful, and I'm so glad that they're here to join us today. So we're gonna you're gonna hear from Judge Samantha P. Jessner to my right, who was appointed 17 years ago. She previously served as the assistant presiding judge, supervising judge of the civil division, assistant supervising judge of the civil division, and the supervising judge of the mental health courthouse, an expert in this topic. Judge Jessner earned a bachelor's degree from Stanford University and a law degree from Berkeley Law. She is at the helm of what CareCorps is going to be doing here in LA County. Then we move to Dr. Lisa Wong, director of LA County's Department of Mental Health. Dr. Wong started her career with the county as a student 30 years ago and spent more than 2 decades working in the Skid Row area of LA, providing care to some of our most vulnerable populations and high-risk individuals experiencing homelessness and mental illness. Dr. Wong then earned her doctorate in psych from the Pacifica Graduate Institute and her MA in clinical psychology from CSU LA. After Dr. Wong, we will hear from the Public Defender's Office. Ricardo Garcia has served as LA County's public defender since 2018. After obtaining his JD from UC Berkeley in 1995, Garcia began his legal career at the San Diego Public Defender's Office. His exceptional skills led to his recruitment in 1998 as the youngest attorney in the San Diego Alternative Public Defender's Office. I'm the youngest state senator in California, and he was the youngest public defender. Great things. In 2004, Garcia assumed the pivotal role of Director of Criminal Justice at the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California, where his professional journey, coupled with his devotion to upholding justice, solidifies his reputation as an innovative leader in the legal field. And that's just a small thing of everyone's background, who are been put in a position to really help the people who need a lot of help. So what is this, the run of show here is, we're gonna start with a slideshow from the judge here, another slideshow from the director, and then we're gonna end it with a slideshow from the public defender. After that, my goal is to leave some time for y'all to ask questions that perhaps were not covered in the slide. I'll be moderating those questions, so please write them down as you see the slideshow. And hopefully, after this, you come out as experts or somewhat experts in this, and you learn how to help, whether you work at a nonprofit, whether you're in clinical mental health, or whether you're representatives of other offices, because we're gonna be getting a lot of calls from this, and we wanna make sure people are as prepared as possible to be able to respond to that. So thank you so much for coming out on a Friday. Today's Friday afternoon, when you have 2 different weeks, when you're Sacramento and here on your days mushed together. Thank you for coming out on a Friday afternoon to learn about a topic that is so important to us, and I know together we can really help our most vulnerable. So, you're not here to hear me, so I'm gonna kick it off. To your honor, you're gonna kick us off here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. As the Senator said, my name is Samantha Jessner. I'm the presiding judge of the Los Angeles Superior Court. It has been an honor to work with the Senator and her office to put together this opportunity to really spread the word about this new innovative program and hopefully give you some background to enable you to ask some questions at the end of our program or our organized remarks. It's really a privilege to be here today with the leadership of the Department of Mental Health, as well as the Office of the Public Defender and the Independent Defense Counsel's Office, which you're going to hear a little bit about. And it's a privilege to be here to sort of collectively to provide information to enable all of you to take advantage of this new tool or help others take advantage of this new tool to address the dueling mental health and homelessness crises in Los Angeles County. I also want to thank the president and Los Angeles Valley College for hosting this lovely event on a very beautiful Friday afternoon. So let me start by kind of giving you a little bit of background about the CARE Act, because hopefully it will sort of make you understand how we got to where we are today. So the CARE Act, you know, Sacramento, they like to abbreviate everything. So the CARE Act stands for the Community Assistance Recovery and Empowerment Act. And it was passed in 2022. The act authorizes certain adults and entities to petition a civil court or go to a civil court and ask the court to create a voluntary care agreement or a court-ordered care plan that may include treatment, housing support, and other services for persons with untreated and diagnosed schizophrenia or other specific psychotic disorders. In essence, the CARE Act leverages judicial oversight to deliver mental health treatment and support services to the most severely impaired Californians. So let me talk a little bit about who is eligible in terms of this statute or this law. And it's important to keep in mind that eligibility for care court pursuant to the statutory scheme is pretty specific. In other words, care court is not for everyone. Specifically, individuals must meet all of the following criteria in order to be considered. And let me take you through those criteria. The respondent, you know, the person for which the court and others are seeking support for, must be 18 years of age or older. The person must be diagnosed within the schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders class of mental health disease and currently experiencing symptoms. The person must not be clinically stabilized in ongoing treatment. Their mental health must be substantially deteriorating. They must be unlikely to survive safely in the community without support and or need services to prevent relapse and deterioration further. Participation in a care plan must be the least restrictive alternative, and the person must be likely to benefit from participation in a care plan. So you'll see that the eligibility requirements require age, a certain diagnoses, and then sort of the status of the person must be substantially deteriorating, as I mentioned. So it's important to be aware that those who do not qualify for care court, so if somebody doesn't meet all of those factors that I just listed, that person may very well qualify for other services provided by the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. So let's talk a little bit, I just covered sort of what factors the respondent must possess, but let me talk a little bit about who can petition the court for a care plan. Who can go into court and ask for the respondent to be provided with or get connected with a care plan. And just like eligibility for care court, there are specific criteria in order to be eligible to petition or ask the court for someone to be enrolled in care court. So I'm gonna walk through these categories. So to petition for care court, you must fall into one of four categories. The first of these is a family member or someone who resides with the individual. This includes a person who the respondent lives with, a spouse, parent, sibling, child, grandparent, or other individual in place of a parent, or the respondent themselves. And we call that a petition. The next category is community and first responders, and this category includes a first responder, a director of a hospital, a licensed behavioral health professional, or a director of a public or charitable organization that provides behavioral health services to the responder. The next category is the county. This includes the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, and you're going to hear from Dr. Wong in a moment, the public guardian, or the director of adult protective services. And then the final category is tribal jurisdiction. So let's talk practically for a minute or two about how somebody goes about filing a care court petition with the court. So to begin or initiate the care court process, the petitioner must fill out and submit 2 forms. The first is what we call a Care 100 form. There will not be a test at the end of my remarks, or it'll be open book and we'll give you the PowerPoint. But that form must include information about both the petitioner and the respondent to make sure you have the right people asking for this and the right people sort of who will be the subject of it. The second form is the Care 101 Mental Health Declaration, which must be completed by a licensed behavioral health provider, and that's really going to provide the court with the information that goes to the mental health status of the respondent. If it's not possible for a licensed behavioral health provider to complete the second form, the petitioner must attach evidence to the Care 100 form, noting the individual was detained on a psychiatric hold under the Welfare and Institutions Code at least twice before, and the most recent involuntary hold occurred within the past 60 days. So once you have these forms prepared, the question then becomes, well, what do I do? Where do I go with the form? Petitions can be submitted either electronically at lacourt.org or in person at one of the 12 clerk's office locations shown on the slide, which is essentially representing each part of our very large county. Electronic filing is mandatory for all attorneys. A self-represented individual can file either electronically or in person, in paper, at a clerk's office window. So you can do it either remotely electronically, or you can go in and file those documents in person. So once the documents are filed, you're probably curious to know what happens after that on the court side. And I'll kind of walk you through generally what it is that happens and explain to you why somebody who has petitioned the court for this care may not be kept apprised or abreast of everything that's happening. First, the court will assess and evaluate the petition for eligibility. Do we have the right person asking for the relief, and is the person that the relief is being asked for or requested on behalf of, does that person meet those criteria that you saw in a couple slides ago? The LA County Department of Mental Health will contact the individual while their petition is under review, and the person may also be contacted by an appointed attorney. And you're going to hear from your public defender in just a moment more specifically. The court will then hold closed hearings, confidential hearings, to determine whether the individual can participate in care court. You can well imagine and well understand, given the nature of the information, why these proceedings would be confidential. And if the petition is accepted, the LA County Department of Mental Health will become the petitioner. So they will substitute out, for example, a mother or a father or a roommate who has petitioned, and the Department of Mental Health will remain the petitioner for the duration of the case. So in practical terms, it means exactly what I said. Whoever originally petitioned will be replaced by the DMH. Following the initial hearings, the court will schedule check-in hearings to learn about the individual's progress. It is what it sounds like. You check in, see how everything is going. The progress of the respondent will be monitored for the duration of the care court process, which typically lasts for 1 year, but can be extended for up to 2 years. So I talked a little bit about in-person and remote options to access the court. Let me give you a little bit more detail. We have 2 courtrooms that are devoted to the CARE Act and the CARE petitions. They are located in our Norwalk Courthouse in Departments B and Z. Participants can attend their hearings in person at the Norwalk Courthouse, but they can also access those hearings or participate in those hearings via remote appearance options. The pandemic, happened, right? And I struggle and I challenge myself to think of good things that we learned from the pandemic because it was so terribly difficult and challenging. And here's a good thing. As a result of the pandemic, the court has found that remote appearance options result in significant savings and benefits associated with finding your way to court, paying for parking, paying for transportation, finding somebody to take care of your child, and the list goes on when you have to devote time to a court proceeding. And we are very grateful to the legislative branch for extending our authority as a court to continue to be able to conduct remote proceedings, because not for every proceeding, but for a lot of things that we do in the court, you can have meaningful access to the court via a remote appearance. So if you are involved in the care court process, but you don't have internet access, we have dedicated private spaces available at self-help centers across Los Angeles County. So we've really tried to endeavor to provide different ways for persons that may benefit from a care court plan to be able to access the court, and ways that provide them with an atmosphere that's not as intimidating perhaps as going to court. So let's talk about our website, because we're proud. We're proud of a lot of things around care court, because it really is a great example of agencies working across the aisle, so to speak, and working together to get this off the ground a year earlier than we were supposed to. And one of those things is our website. So it's a great place to find all the information related to care court in LA County. You can see the address, lacourt.org/care. It's mobile friendly, it's available in multiple languages, and includes additional information such as frequently asked questions. There's some helpful videos and other information that we really think is beneficial to get a better idea when you have questions, once you kind of wrap your mind around this, that is very easy to access. So what has happened in the last 3 months? We do have some data, which I think is important, and as the senator said, it's still early, especially for this sort of subject matter. Measures of mental health and treatments and improvements and other things go on, usually last longitudinally for years, right? But we can tell you what we know based upon roughly the first 90 days. And I have a couple of tips, and these are things I think we didn't necessarily anticipate, but we have learned, and it's always good to continue to learn. So since December 1st, when we opened the 2 care courts, we have received 80 care court petitions. Of those 80, 22% were deemed ineligible. So that means that somebody looked at those 2 forms and determined that they did not meet that eligibility criteria. More than half of the remaining are currently awaiting a suitability report from the Department of Mental Health. So you might remember a few minutes ago I said that the Department of Mental Health and/or an attorney was likely to reach out to the respondent. That is in progress. About a quarter of all petitions have been scheduled for their initial hearing. So the initial hearing before the care court judge. All but one of these petitions were filed by family members. And about half of these petitions were for unhoused individuals. So it kind of gives you an idea, what's the volume so far? Who are we seeing? Who's coming in to seek this set of support tools? And what does that demographic look like? Self-help centers. I'm very happy to report that the court assisted more than 200 individuals at our self-help centers. Why can't I say that? It's Friday afternoon. Self-help centers during the first few months of implementation. And as I said, a couple things that we've learned that we've sort of pivoted into tips. So DMH staff has reported that it can be difficult and time-consuming to find the respondent. And they have pointed out, and I think this is a great point, that a photo of the respondent can very much aid with that search or the location efforts to find the respondent. So if you or if you know individuals who are seeking to request a care court plan, it would be helpful to submit a photo along with the petition of the respondent if you have one available. And care court cases are confidential, as I mentioned earlier, which I think for some people is a little bit frustrating, but we're dealing with mental health issues, and so it makes sense that they would be confidential. But know this, even though the hearings are confidential, petitioners can get case updates at clerk's offices throughout the county by presenting an identification. So if you want to know, for example, when is the next hearing? What is the next hearing? Is it an eligibility hearing? Is it a progress report? Whatever. You can sort of get information about that procedural process. As I mentioned, we are very proud of the work that all of us that you see represented up here did over the past year or so to collaborate and do everything within our power to set up procedures, processes, operations to initiate this with a goal for success. I think you're probably tired of me talking, and I'm gonna say that I'm very happy to be joined today by our esteemed director of the Department of Mental Health, Dr. Lisa Wong, and turn it over to Dr. Wong.
Thank you, Judge Jessner. I can listen to you for a very long time.
If you can't sleep, right?
Not at all. So I just want to provide you some additional information about the care court process. Our role at LA County Department of Mental Health within care court includes the ability to refer a respondent, provide the clinical evaluation to identify the actual needs of the person, support the co-creation of a care plan that outlines what the recommended services are that we think will be helpful, and also provide support, treatment, and services as detailed in the care plan. Step one of the process really begins when a family member, roommate, clinician, or other eligible person files a CARE Act petition. And as the judge had mentioned, we have seen the vast majority of the petitions filed by family members. And I think we saw this with the ramp up to care court implementing a year early. We have a lot of families out there who are desperate for the help and want that kind of care for their loved ones who they have felt, have gone without care for a very long time. So step two, as the judge mentioned, involves a judge determining whether the potential participant meets the criteria for the CARE program, which is very, very specific. Step 3 is dependent on whether a participant's accepted into the CARE program, and if so, their care team works with them to develop a plan that will provide services that are really tailored to their needs. And this may include medication, housing, social services, and other needs and issues. Our hope is really that we can kind of engage with the client and win them over to be a voluntary participant in all of this and be engaged in the process. And the plan will provide the individual services for up to a year, but that can be extended for another year if it's necessary. Review hearings will be scheduled periodically to assess the progress and ensure that services are provided quickly. And one significant area of confusion is whether CARE Court is voluntary or are people compelled or forced to do it. I know in the time leading up to the implementation of CARE Court, we heard a lot from the public around this, and I just want to emphasize that CARE Court is a voluntary process. People are not forced into the participation. To be clear, CARE Court, again, is completely voluntary from start to finish and allows participants to leave the program at any point. Even if someone is deemed eligible for CARE Court, there's no civil or criminal penalty for people who refuse to participate, and court orders are non-binding. While DMH staff work hard to gain the trust and confidence of these individuals to participate in CARE Court, it's important to point out that in any stage of this process, the participant can choose not to continue with the program. Of course, our hope is that as somebody engages and they participate, they start to see the benefits and they start to develop a relationship with the people providing care, and that helps to compel them to stay in treatment. However, we hope the CARE program really serves as a point of entry for all communities to learn about the spectrum of DMH programs and services available to people of all ages across our Los Angeles communities. We really saw one of the benefits of CARE Court, not just being, that somebody is pulled into this court process and given a care plan and, monitored and going through this. We were really hoping that would just expose all families and community members to what's available for their loved one or for themselves. Because as the judge mentioned, the criteria is very, very narrow. So a lot of people don't fall within that criteria, but have significant mental health needs. And we would like to take that opportunity as people look into CARE Court to be able to expand on, okay, what are the ways in which those needs can be met outside of the CARE Court process? So for slide 10, because CARE Court is so narrowly focused on individuals with schizophrenia or other associated disorders, it really impacts a very small number of people in Los Angeles County. But these are people who are really vulnerable and at risk, so the CARE Court process can make a huge difference in their lives. As we engage individuals through that process, we want to use that opportunity to guide them about what DMH services can be of most help to them based on their needs. So even if somebody chooses to leave the process and step out, maybe it's an exposure for them that has hopefully been positive and they know they can come back, or they know there's a clinic in their neighborhood they can go to, or there's a number that they can call to reach out when they're in need. And if an individual doesn't qualify for CARE Court, we don't want them or their loved ones to feel discouraged or frustrated. Rather, through a no wrong door approach, we can help point them to many other programs that exist within the DMH continuum. Services provided include assessments, case management, crisis intervention, medication support, peer support, which I think is tremendously important to be able to connect with other people who've gone through the things that they've gone through, and other rehabilitative services. These services are provided in multiple settings, such as residential facilities, clinics, schools, hospitals, in the community, on the streets, camps, boarding cares. We really want to be able to reach people where they're at and where they feel comfortable. anyone wants to learn more about the services provided by LA County DMH, please visit dmh.lacounty.gov/gethelpnow, which I think is up there, or call our toll-free number at 1-800-854-7771. The number is staffed 24/7 and has designated staff to meet the needs of those who served in the military as well. If you or a loved one are in crisis or experiencing some kind of emotional distress, you can call or text also 988. That's the new 988 line that has been implemented for mental health crisis and suicidal ideation. This service is also available free of charge, 24/7, very low barrier. It can be anonymous if you wish. It really has been very good about getting people to a place where they feel they have somebody to talk to. And to connect with a trained crisis counselor via text message, you can also text LA to 741-741. And finally, for general or non-crisis or emergency support and information, you can call 211 to be connected to health, human, and social services. So I think the last slide we have are DMH resources. Please, feel free to write these down or get a copy of the PowerPoint so that you can access these services at any time. We also encourage people to visit their local self-help centers all across the county. These have been tremendous points of engagement and information for people to really find out what's available out there. And now I am happy to pass it on to our Los Angeles County Public Defender, Ricardo Garcia.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank Senator Ms. Vard and her entire team for really making this possible, as well as the school and its president for giving us this great space. I know it's warm, you're a little tired in the afternoon, so I will hopefully not take too long. I am Ricardo Garcia, and as the judge said, I am your Los Angeles County Public Defender, and I am the youngest appointed defender for the county, but also the first Latino to be appointed to this position in the 110-year history of the office. So something I'm very proud of. The responsibility for legal representation of individuals who come into care court has fallen on the public defender's office per legislation. That's why we're here. The court is taking on this novel approach to helping people who have severe mental illness, schizophrenia, through a court process which is different than our traditional court structure. I think most people, when they think about the courts, they think of an adversarial relationship, right? The parties are fighting each other, sometimes even with the court, to get an end result that benefits their particular side of the conversation. In this situation, we're really trying to take a novel approach, which is working collaboratively, working together to help the person who's been brought into the care court process. And I think that's everyone's goal in the care court, which is really unique and I think pretty neat, quite frankly. The limit of people with schizophrenia and disorders that come from that is important to note, because I think initially people thought that this was going to be a broad net that would allow so many individuals in Los Angeles to receive services. But while it is a novel approach to helping our neighbors, it's important to understand it has a limited reach. And I think that's why what Dr. Wong said is so critical, to understand that it's not just the care court services that people are exposed to if they put in a petition. Even if they don't qualify, they now may have access to additional services that the county has available for them. So I want to kind of emphasize that point. If you have a loved one or you know someone who you think may not qualify for care court, you're not sure, get them into the process, because there will be other services that they likely will be able to fall into. And so I think that's an important avenue that we really didn't have open for the community before. Because we have responsibility for the legal services of the individuals, I want to emphasize that the care court process is not a silver bullet. It's not going to end homelessness in Los Angeles. It by itself is not going to end our mental health crisis here in Los Angeles. It's important to have reasonable expectations, but it is a tool. It is a tool we didn't have before to really address something that we often feel weak or helpless to talk about or to fix. And so this additional tool is something that we can really rely on, and we're seeing positive results. I want to say, though, that in that process, I don't get to do this often, so I'm not recording. I'm going to object, Your Honor.
Like you always do.
I fall back to my old nature, and that is
Do I
that
get to rule?
you do. I think this rule is going to go my way. I'm pretty confident. So because we get up-to-date information pretty regularly, I just learned today, right now, as we were sitting here, from my team, that we actually had 94 petitioners, 92 of which have been assigned to the Public Defender's Office through Ricardo, which I described. So you can see that even
I will
with,
take judicial notice
Thank
of
you,
the
Your
fact
Honor.
that it's not 80, it's 94.
But I think that really speaks volumes about how we're improving those numbers in such a short period of time. And so I'm hopeful that that'll continue to be something that we see throughout Los Angeles. I want to emphasize that every individual that comes into care court, that this is a voluntary process. This is not, they're not obligated to do it. And part of the responsibility of the attorneys, along with protecting their rights and ensuring their participation and working collaboratively with the other team members to find the appropriate program, is to make sure that that is a voluntary process, that people get to decide whether they want to be involved or not. But again, going back to Dr. Wong's point, even if a person says no, they feel that this is not the right program for them, we're going to look for other options. We're going to try to find ways to help those individuals address their challenges and concerns. Now, what I want to also say is that Care Court, although it's assigned to my office, we've taken a little bit of a novel approach in Los Angeles compared to other counties. We had a limited period of time to get ourselves up and running, and we really worked well as a team. And so rather than placing this in Public Defender's Office per se, where we have a more traditional adversarial process and have to retrain a bunch of attorneys on a different way of attacking their work, we decided to place it in the Independent Defense Counsel Office, which is a new part, separate and independent part of the Public Defender Office. And it is run by Mr. Marco Saenz.
Good afternoon.
It is Mr. Saenz' team that is responsible for the day-to-day representation of individuals in care court. It is his team that has selected lawyers who are knowledgeable and experienced in the questions of mental illness with regards to clients, and who also have been trained in a much more collaborative approach in the court process. I keep using that word collaborative because that's the key, not just for the people in the process, but for the family members. We want people to get help. We want them to get services. The administration of ITCO is without interference from the other side of the Public Defender's Office, so we know they're focusing on the interests of the care court clients, and they're taking on this responsibility and focus an entire unit just to that. So I want you to know that within our office, we have prioritized this in the highest way to make sure that the individuals that respond to care court are getting exceptional legal representation, again, focusing on their needs for care. So with that, I thought I'd be quick, skip by the rest of the notes, and then give it to you, who really, if you have questions, I can do whatever we want to do. Sorry.
Oh, right there.
Hi, good afternoon. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Christy Lopez. I'm the Senator's District Director. It is very nice to meet all of you, and I'm glad that you are all here today. The Senator had to step out for a quick briefing on the budget, which is super important given where we are with the budget, and so I will be moderating for just about 5 or 10 minutes until she comes back. And so would like to open it up to anyone if they have any questions for our distinguished panelist at this time. You can just raise your hand and stand up and ask the question. Yes, sir.
I didn't hear a housing support included in the care court. Is that something that's going to be included or no?
Yes, housing support is definitely included. I think it's a very essential part of helping somebody with, struggles with a very serious mental illness, so we have that built in. Not by the state, but the Department of Mental Health is providing housing.
Yes.
I have one question for Mr. Ricardo Garcia.
Sir.
It's if somebody's in custody, is eligible to apply for the program? If somebody from outside a family member intends to enroll?
That's a really good question. The care court process is independent and separate from the criminal legal process. So they're not two systems that work along the same channels. So a person that is in custody has to deal with the criminal legal process independent of care court. If after that matter was resolved, or that was a separate issue that was taken care of, then they could potentially be eligible for the care court process, but they're not joint systems at this time.
Even though that, the court, ordered, a program,
That's you were asking. Yes, the court can order a program for an individual if their lawyer in the criminal legal process determines with the court and other members that that's the right avenue for the individual. That's separate from care court. It's a completely different process. It may be connected to the Department of Mental Health as an additional service that they provide, but it is not part of the care court system. Once that's done, and they're done with the criminal legal system, then there's a different avenue potentially for them. But while they're in the criminal legal process, there are avenues that are separate from care court for them to engage in.
thank you.
I believe you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could offer a little bit more clarity in terms of how it might look with a law enforcement referral. Like, for example, if it's a requirement that a person has to have a has to be diagnosed with schizophrenia or another psychotic disorder, how would a law enforcement officer know that? How would they put that in the report? Is it arbitrary? Can they just say, it looks like this person is experiencing these symptoms and make the referral? I'm just wondering if you could offer a little more details in terms of how law enforcement would interact with this process.
So, I think your question is, so if you need sort of a behavioral, clinical, provider to attach evidence, right, to the form, how does a law enforcement person do that?
Right.
And so there are two different ways that you can sort of get past that condition or prerequisite. And one is if you have this declaration which a licensed behavioral health provider provides. So law enforcement wouldn't necessarily have that, right? Or you can attach evidence that the person has been involuntarily detained on a psychiatric hold at least twice, and one of those was in the last 60 days. So law enforcement probably would have information about that, whether they've been 5150 or 5250. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so I'm a little confused. I was wondering if you could provide a little bit of clarity around the requirements. So according to the slide, it says that people that qualify have like severe mental health issues, schizophrenia, or a psychiatric disorder. How does one opt in or opt out of a program if they're severely mentally ill?
Well, I think people participating in care court, they are not conserved. Being under conservatorship is when you lose the ability to take yourself in or out of murder because you're deemed so impaired that you can't make those judgments safely. So even though somebody is really suffering from a very serious mental illness, they still have the right to self-determination. And even if we don't think it's in their best interest, they can still say, I don't choose to participate at this time, or I don't want to do this.
Okay. And that would be the perspective of the clinician, but when someone's in court, what would that perspective look like, and how would the judge make that determination? And then how would the public defender represent the person?
If the individual indicates to their attorney that they're not interested in participating in the program, because it's a voluntary program, then their participation there at that point. Their attorney is not there to convince the person or force the person into treatment. Now, because it's a collaborative process and we're interested in the person getting help, getting treatment, the attorney is going to give them their options and their choices, but encourage them, I would say, maybe strongly encourage them to do the program, but there's not going to be a forced aim or told that they have to do this. So if they say they don't want to do it, and the lawyer's job at that point is to advocate and tell the court, client's not interested, and because it's a voluntary process, the court cannot force them to participate at that point with care court.
And I would just add, kind of highlighting what Mrs. Garcia said about sort of strongly urging the person to voluntarily accept services, the court's gonna be part of that conversation as well. You know, we sort of look at this as a team effort, and we'll kind of pull out all the stops to try to convince somebody that their voluntary participation in this program is really gonna benefit them in the short term and the long term.
I think sometimes what helps too is having the conversation with the respondent about, you know, well, what's the reason you don't wanna do this? Is there something about what's been recommended that bothers you, or are we not getting at something that's important to you? So to really like be where the client is I've had clients who are completely like psychotic and delusional and say like their goal in treatment is to become the president of the United States and be able to roller skate. And even if I don't think that that's something very reasonable, we can talk about, okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that you want to have a little more control in your life, or you want to do something that gives you a little more freedom. What do you think that might look like? Or I think this can help you towards your goal. What do you think about trying this? So it becomes a conversation where we really try to engage somebody, but at the end of the day, if they want to pull out, they get to pull out. And like Mr. Garcia said, their attorney is there to represent, you know, what they want to do.
I think it's a good question you're asking. It's a question a lot of people have. Is the question of support, I think, is important, and trust, whether it's with the clinicians or the attorney. These are individuals who very frequently come into the process with a very deep distrust of the court system, or even any kind of legal process. And as I kept saying, the difference between the criminal legal process, right? I think it's important to separate them. This is not a criminal court. These are not individuals who are charged with an offense. These are not people who are looking at going into jail if they don't participate in care court. But oftentimes they're not aware of that because they may have gone in and out of the criminal legal part. So courts can be very intimidating and also be a location that they don't feel comfortable. Part of what the attorney does in that role is to build a trust relationship with the client, so that hopefully in the communication that the individual who's involved will be able to at least know, to the best of their ability, that the people here are looking out for their best interest, and that this environment, the care court, is about that care. We're stuck with the care court because that's the term we give. Court creates a certain connotation and idea in our minds, and we have attorneys there because of that. But it is really the emphasis on the care part. We're trying to find ways to ensure that individuals have trust in the clinicians, right, and that community, trust in their attorneys, and more importantly, trust in the process. And that's can take time. It can be a delicate situation. And a person who today says, no, I don't want to do it, right, but their attorney or someone from the Department of Mental Health or my office stays in contact with them, that person may come back later on and say, you know what, I've had a second thought, or I'm ready to do this. And that is not a surprising reality for people in that circumstance in their lives.
That's a really great question. If I could just follow up. So if someone opts out, they're able to opt back in. What does opting back in look like? It would be them contacting the lawyer that they were your office before. What does the opt back in process look like?
We haven't had that quite yet.
Okay.
So I think but I wouldn't make it as easy as possible from our end. I presume we'd already have their documentation, so we'd start from there.
And they could self-petition,
Right.
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Or they can just choose to engage with the Department of Mental Health even outside of the care court process. So, you know, that happens with us sometimes where first pass, somebody doesn't want anything to do with us, but as we build a relationship, you know, they warm up. I worked with a young lady in Skid Row who was a heroin addict and schizophrenic, and, you know, she would hide from me in alleys, but she saw that I kept coming back every week, even if it was just like granola bars and socks, and she didn't come into the clinic, but at some point it warmed her up enough to accept help from the next person, and today she's on one of our home teams doing homeless outreach.
That's great. Oh, and I think there was a question over here prior to and then I will come back. I'll come back over here.
So my question is, right, most of the time that individuals who are diagnosed with schizophrenic or any psychotic disorder, they also have a substance use disorder. With that, do they have to be sober, or, no, so they don't, okay.
It'll be a goal, I
Yeah.
can guarantee you,
Yeah.
on the plan, on the care plan, but no, it does not require sobriety.
If you had a question over here, and then we'll go back over there.
So, we know that a lot of people having mental health issues are also experiencing homelessness, and we have a severe shortage of beds. So how many beds do you have available? And are there like long-term facilities, you know, that people participating in this program are able to go to and stabilize and get themselves back on their feet? Sorry.
With the Department of Mental Health, we have sort of an array of beds, everything from like involuntary hospitalization to, you know, our subacute units, which are also locked. But care court isn't about that section of care. So from that point, we have crisis residential facilities, we have enriched residential care, which is like boarding cares, but with extra mental health services provided, down to regular mental health service, boarding cares where you're connected with like a full service partnership program, down to permanent supportive housing, we have interim housing. So it depends like where the person is and their functioning, then we can connect them with the appropriate bed. The good thing is we have a lot of beds that we've developed in that spectrum. Where we have less beds is in the acute and subacute arena where, you know, facilities are locked. But those locked facilities don't, you know, really apply to the care court population.
And I will take this gentleman, and then the senator will take the rest of the Q&A. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I was happy to hear that it was voluntary process, but it still kind of confuses me of why have a quasi-judicial process involved in the voluntary program. And again, that's confusing to me still. And then also, what are the other counties in the state doing? Are they all voluntary, or does anybody know that answer that?
Yeah, care court across the entire state is all voluntary. They have to follow the same mandates. And it is kind of confusing because, you know, why do you have a court process if this is voluntary? And I think what this does is it brings partners together, number one, to collaborate in a way that we haven't before. Number two, I think it's given families and community members a way to bring their concerns to the table rather than seeking out like individual clinics or individual help or whatever. And I think it probably, honestly, it emphasizes the seriousness of bringing this person into treatment. You know, so even though we're not saying that they are like, you know, remanded into treatment kind of, we are saying that there are very serious concerns about this person's well-being in the community. And so we're all coming together to try to put together the best plan possible to see this person through.
Next question? Yeah.
Thank you. I guess to follow up to that question, what would you do in a situation where, say, somebody does want to opt out, or if they're otherwise ineligible because they don't have a diagnosable condition, would you still provide either the respondent or the petitioner with resources that they can access on their own?
Yes, definitely. We have a whole team of folks who work with care court who are clinicians and community health workers who will follow somebody and follow up with them and say, hey, you know, you didn't want to do this, but we have these other services. Can we take you somewhere? Can we connect you with somebody? And you know, that really is, I think, almost the biggest benefit of care court is making sure that people are connected to care wherever they land, you know, that spectrum of like qualifying or not qualifying.
Doctor, you mentioned some of DMH's recent hiring efforts around this to help with providing some of those resources.
Yeah, we've had a tremendous hiring effort behind care court because we knew we were going to need a lot more people to follow people closely, and you're not going to be able to provide the kind of follow-up that's needed for the population if you have like 150 people on your caseload. So what we did was we looked for people who are specifically very dedicated to working with folks who are high acuity and who need to be found and need to be connected and engaged. So we have, I think we've done over 50 hires just for care court, and we have more that are going to be hired as well.
You have a question over there? Yellow blazer?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, first of all, to our panelists for being here. It's very exciting. My name is Renee, and last year, my 93-year-old mother, I had to call 3 times for a nephew who was residing with her too long, about 12 years, supposed to be there for 6 months. 5150, he would get in, get released, get back out, get released, get back out. And my mom had to come basically move with us because he was violent and schizophrenic. So I was very excited when I heard about CarePort. And I want to commend you, Dr. Wong, for sharing that you have actually gone out yourself for outreach. That's very commendable. And my question really is, what kind of, do they have wraparound services? Is there one person for success to walk them through this? Because as we know, it's all about relationship, like you explained. Could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. You know, when CarePort first came out, there was a plan to have peer partners, but unfortunately that didn't make it into the legislation. So what the Department of Mental Health did was we applied with the state for a grant to have peers available to walk somebody through. So no matter where they are in the process, they can have somebody who's kind of been through what they've been through and be like, in the veterans world, we call them battle buddies, to kind of accompany them through. But I think, you know, what's really important though is that whatever road they choose to, you know, whichever road they choose to take, they can still have somebody accompany them. And that consistency is really important because first time, it might not take, second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, maybe not. But if you have somebody that you're engaged with, then you know you have a growth staff. And we have what's called full service partnerships, which is our highest level of outpatient service. And it's a 24/7 team with very low caseloads. Like our typical caseloads I mentioned are about 150 people to one clinician. The caseloads for FSP are 12 to 1, and they are 24/7, and their motto is do whatever it takes. So for CarePort participants, the vast majority of them, their care plan involves a full service partnership. That's kind of the level of service most people are ending up with.
That's good news. That's good. I also serve on the board of directors for SPA2, our homeless coalition. So I know that there's fantastic people. So many people are doing wonderful work, and I appreciate that this is another tool in our tool belt. So thank you for it.
We're gonna switch over back to this side for any questions. If not, I'll go back.
Once services are approved, how will the participant have to be out of pocket? Will they be able to use Medi-Cal?
Typically, it would be Medi-Cal, and that vast majority of our folks, you know, qualify for Medi-Cal. But we have a real no wrong door approach, so that even if somebody's completely unfunded, like let's say it's somebody with no Medi-Cal coverage, they're indigent, whatever, they will still get the service. The county still covers it. Now, sometimes there could be a shared cost, or there could be other things like that, but the services are available to everybody.
One question, a legal question. What about if a person is undocumented or is not legal in the country? Still eligible?
Still eligible just like everybody else.
Go back on this side. Scanning.
I forgot my question. Related to the paying for this. So if let's say if someone is approved meets all the criteria and they are getting followed by enhanced care management program, which is what we use at our CDO for homeless folks who are substance abuse, etc. They're already being followed. They have a case worker. If the staff is following along with the recommendations of CarePort, would they then essentially be getting double wraparound services and one would cancel out the other, or not?
Typically, if somebody's already engaged with services, then they are not qualified for CarePort in most cases, unless they are they're technically enrolled, but they don't attend, they're refusing, they won't take medication, not participating at all, then they can still qualify. But if somebody is engaged with an ECM team and following through with that and everything, that's not typically somebody who would qualify for CarePort.
Go ahead.
I have 2 questions. One being, if the client has previously denied an FSP, and then when they if they decide to do that, and they still deny the application, are they still able to get, services?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
They would, yeah, we'd have almost nobody in FSP if they couldn't get in after denying once or twice or 3 times.
Or nobody in other services.
Yeah.
And then, my second one is, I know that sometimes if they are unhoused, right, and they're not, they're not adherent to medication, sometimes it's hard to locate them. Like they can go, right, you miss them for months. Is there a time frame where it's like, after a certain amount of time that you guys just close out the case?
Typically, we evaluate for a case, what we call deactivation. We never close out a case, but we will deactivate a case after, we'll evaluate it 90 days, and then we'll go beyond that. So, and then it's very, because we don't actually close out cases, it's really easy to activate somebody again once we find them. But, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the kind of side benefits we found with Care Court was that a lot of families who filed petitions, they were on family members who had just kind of disappeared. So we've been able to actually connect some families back with their family members who, they had no idea where they were.
Thank you.
Right here in the front?
Just for a clarification for myself, is there kind of an age limit that you all have for this? Are you able to recommend all ages? What does that look like?
Over 18.
Over 18, okay.
All experts now?
Yep.
Any further questions? Okay,
So you mentioned you were working with, for you to provide housing support, with LA Family Housing, be one of those, providers?
Definitely.
So,
Do you work with LA Families?
No, I don't.
Oh.
But if let's say, someone recommends, a patient of ours from Care Court, they accept they think the full year, does that, cause I know housing is the biggest issue for folks who apply for LA Family Housing, would that help them get into housing quicker, sooner, or if let's say, they're considering patient and they're saying their meds, everything is good, but housing is, the one thing the most not to deal with that, is something like that considered on a case-by-case basis?
No, that person would not qualify for Care Court, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that they can't access housing and services from the Department of Health anyway. And one of our biggest challenges, I think, in the mental health world is we have enough beds technically, but for most people, they want to stay in their community. So we might have 20 open beds in Bell Shelter, but somebody might not want to go to Bell. So one of the things we're really working on is developing housing options for people in their chosen communities so that they're more likely to stay or want to go there.
Kind of off topic related to it, have you heard of Project Safety, the city of San Diego do? So they're essentially dedicated parking lots or spots where folks can sleep there, consider and receive mental health services there. So that's something that I found out enough about.
We actually have that in LA County also.
We have it at the Midnight Mission, but we don't have it here in the valley. We're going to San Fernando Valley, as far as I know. If you could provide me somewhere where I can.
We just have it for cars here in the valley.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have it to actually, yeah. we don't have
I
it.
think probably the best people to speak with in the valley would be Hope of the Valley or
Hope the Mission.
Hope the Mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just because you mentioned Hope the Mission, with the legislation that passed last year to have places of worship built, the Valley is going to have one of those projects in North Hills that we're really excited about, just because of the vast amount of land a lot of these places have. So just made me think of that. Yes.
I'm sorry. Just like last follow-up question, I'll be honest, I came into this town hall thinking that this was coercive, that there was an involuntary aspect to it, so I think that there's a lot of misconceptions, and I think doing town halls like this is an important step to kind of break down those misconceptions for the community. I'm just wondering if you're familiar with any other efforts that are being made to kind of inform the community and, debunk some of the myths surrounding Care Courts.
We've been having town halls
Yeah.
all over the place.
We're trying. I think you're 100% right, and again, it goes back to the idea when you put court in the conversation, it feels coercive, and we're really trying to get out and educate as many people as possible. I think one of the ways, obviously, you now are educators on this, so when people ask you, you can tell them it's not coercive, it's voluntary. But you can also refer them to the phone numbers, to have them call my office, ITCO, any one of the locations will help them, will tell them, no, it's completely voluntary. And I think that's also the importance of it, is it coercive isn't gonna work to be successful in the long run. People are going to bristle and push against that much more aggressively than when they begin to trust it and know that it is a supported process. So, and that's really the best part of having all of you here, is that you can go out and share that message with your communities.
Are you gonna share the slides with us?
The slides are printed.
Oh.
There's the slides on the check-in table that you can take with you.
We recorded the entire townhouse, so you'll have a copy and you can share it with your colleagues or whomever. In the back?
I'm just wondering, will you be posting updated data on the website, or where can I follow the data that's going to be coming up over the next year?
I was looking at our executive officer, and he's doing this. So yes, the answer is yes, which is, really something that the court has endeavored to do over the last year, and hopefully going forward, is to provide more transparency to the extent we can. Some of these things that we can't under the law, but I would suggest that you just go on to lacourt.org/care, and you'll find that's where we will post it.
I will add to that, up in Sacramento, we will be holding hearings as well in the upcoming years, and we'll bring different county representatives just to talk about CareCard as a whole. So, our job also is to make sure the funding that we brought down, or whatever statute that we're mandating counties to do, that we're aligned. So we'll be doing that as well. Jonah?
Thank you, Senator. So I know during COVID, a lot of the DMH field-based teams had a lot of success with outpatient conservatorship and the remote court hearings in the streets. Since 50% of the petitions have been for people experiencing homelessness, I am curious if there are conversations about bringing us back to there, or what we could do to help with that, to help facilitate some of these court hearings on the streets.
I think that for care court, it's not an issue because that's allowed. When we're talking about the outpatient conservatorship program, that's a conversation that the PD and I are gonna have to develop.
So stick your conversation, probably
Okay.
not a good.
I should have clarified too, I work for Supervisor Horvath, so we'll be in touch about it. So appreciate you elevating it though.
It's important.
We got less than 5 minutes. Start with the gentleman here and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you. So are these hearings like private, confidential? And then what kind of safeguards exist for the patient that is going through these hearings? And my next, so I'm sorry, it's like a two-part question. Can these hearings or any type of proceeding in care court be used against someone if they have committed a crime or equivalent drugs?
No, the hearings are confidential. They're not open to the public. They're open to the participant, the attorney, the court staff, clinicians, staff that needs to be there to do the hearing, but they're not a public hearing. That's not there are other types of hearings like that in the court system, so that part is not a novel approach. The court has experience on how to close out the courts to public access in that sense.
And this hasn't even tested because we've gotten some very, I won't mention who, but high-level requests to come sit in to just witness the process, and we've had to say no, and they have not been allowed.
And as far as the safeguard, maybe could you elaborate on that part of the question a little bit?
Safeguard, I mean, I'm just thinking about like criminal proceedings where there's like misconduct, but what if there's misconduct inside of
The court's gonna have a bailiff in there that's a standard process of the court, again, because it's not an adversarial process, we don't have an individual who's shackled or anything like that.
And they have their attorney who's
Yeah.
there to represent them, so, that person really watches out for their rights.
Right here in the front.
And then just a follow-up question in terms of promotion. You all have kind of like bulk printed materials that kind of lay this out that organizations can have on display or anything of that sort?
Yes, we have a lot of materials that are actually at all of our self-help centers, and we have materials online that can be printed from there as well. And Actually, DMH contracted with a PR firm to kind of help get the word out to the public so that there's less misinformation out there.
And Rob Autry, our Director of Communication and Legislative Affairs, is here.
And
And
we'll-
we'll get you anything you want.
And we'll be doing a follow-up if you submitted your emails, and the emails, we'll be providing that as well. We have room for 2 more questions. Right here in the front.
If someone is referred to a care court and someone on their care team or a family member is afraid for them, like testing pathogen, things like that, will these proceedings be used to support the red flag case for that person?
No.
These are completely independent proceedings from any other court processing. That's a key and very important aspect.
But if a family member or community member has a safety concern about that, they can, independent of care court, call that in.
Thank you. So speaking to the court and a record, nothing derogatory if someone goes, I don't want to go to that court, but there might be something derogatory on my record. That's not the reality, right?
No, we're not, this is not, again, it's not a criminal legal process, and we're not looking at prior history. If someone wanted it, their attorney's there, again, to ensure that that is not.
I just wanted to mention that it's all confidential, so even if you're a care court participant or respondent, it's not gonna show up on the public record.
Okay. Perfect. Round of applause for PD, the doctor, and the I just had to step out. We had a hearing on the state's budget, so I had to sit on that as the chair of Health and Human Services, so I apologize, but Chrissy led us off in great Q&A. I appreciate all y'all being engaged in this topic. I mean, the myths about it is so true. So, always willing to, if you have already a crowd of providers, for us to just come. I'm not going to pull them out again, but for us to just come and speak to your colleagues, your peers on this topic, just let us know. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hope you all have a good weekend in this beautiful weather. And please, okay, your biggest challenge, this is my biggest ask for you. Take all this food. Because we can't leave it here.